So in the last video, we saw, a kind of quick introduction of these different windows that we see in the Stata interface. What I want to do in this video is show you how to open up different types of data sets. So, data sets are stored in a variety of formats. And over the course of the semester, we're going to have to open up data sets in kind of three main kinds of formats. So I always find it really useful to use the drop-down menus to open up data sets. So let's start by loading up a data set that's already in Stata format. And so Stata format is a .dta file. So .dta we see down here, and if that's the end of a file name, then you'll see that's in Stata format. So if I click on File and then Open, that's going to take me into a certain folder in my computer, wherever that is. And then I can search and kind of find the data set I'm looking for. So if I click File Open, I'm in this Wooldridge data sets. And so I can pick, these are all different data sets from the textbook, from our Wooldridge textbook, that are already in Stata format. So for instance, if we opened up, I don't know, let's open up Athlete 1. And so we see that Stata executed this command. So this drop-down menu, File, Open, and then just selecting which data set we want. We could have also done the exact same thing by running this code. Hopefully it will copy and paste nicely, but there we go. So if I had, known exactly where this data set was in my computer, which is, none obvious place because of all these, folders and subfolders that I have going on here, I could have just written this into the command line and it would have done the exact same thing. But that's why I said, it's hard to remember, all your, the paths to your different files and things like that in your computer. So I often find it just useful to use the drop-down menu instead of remembering like the syntax and everything of this use command. So we saw when we opened the data set, a couple different things happened, right? We saw that, first of all, here's this variables list. This is the list of all the variables in our data set. Here's a label for all the different variables in our data set. This data set happens to have these labels. Sometimes they don't. So for instance, here's a variable year, and basically it's data set from either the years 1992 and 1993, and so it's just telling whether the observation is in 1992 or 1993. The variable apps is the number of applications for admission that this student made, or that the school received. I don't really know what this data set's about. Okay, the other thing we see is in this history window that we learned about last time, we saw this code, this line of code got run. It's in black because it was successful. And the really convenient thing here is that if we want to run it again, doesn't make much sense in this context, but you can click on it and that old code just comes right back into your command line. So if you made a little mistake and you're like, oops, like you mistyped it and you went like this or something like that, see it's in red now because we screwed up the file path. I could click on it and be like, oh right, it's users, not user. And then it would correctly run the code, but maybe not right now because I have data in memory. All right, so that's how you open up a Stata data set. Let's say I want to look at what this data set, looks like, so to speak. We have kind of two menus here. We have a data editor. This is if you want to change the data set manually. Probably don't really want to do that very often. We want to write lines of code that would change the data set so we can keep track of what's happening. We also have a data browser. We're not going to be able to edit the data in this browser. You can just look at what the data set looks like. So this is what our data set kind of looks like if we opened it up. So we see the columns are these different variables. So we have information on whether the year was 1992 or 1993. I'm going to guess this is school level data. We have the number of applications. We have the percent of frosh in the top 25 percentile of their high school, it looks like. and so on and so forth. So we have all these different variables in the data set. So here, for instance, here's Alabama for 92 and 93, and then Arizona, Arizona State, etc., etc. And so each row here is an observation in the data set. So the columns are the variables, and the rows are the observations. So for instance, this first row, as we just saw, is for Alabama in 1992. The second row is for Alabama in 1993. Then we go on to this next school, which is Arizona, and so Arizona 92, Arizona 93, and so on and so forth. So we see right away that we have these dots, and so what these dots usually mean are there missing values for these variables. So we don't really have information on these two variables, for instance, for Alabama in either year. So that's how we kind of look and see what our data set, how we can see what our data set looks like, I should say. Okay, so that's how we open up a Stata data set. Let's quickly go over how we open up different kinds of data sets.